Good is the enemy of great. Let that sink in for a moment. It's one of the most quietly destructive paradoxes of our lives. We are trained from birth to strive for good. We celebrate good schools. We work hard to get good jobs. We want to be good parents, run good businesses, and live a good life. But what if the very achievement of good is not a stepping stone to greatness, but a comfortable, seductive resting place that prevents us from ever taking the final, difficult, and transformative journey? What if being good enough is the most insidious barrier to becoming the best you can be? This is the central, unsettling question that today's book forces us to confront. It's a question that, once you truly hear it, will echo in every decision you make for the rest of your life. Welcome, everyone. Today we are diving into a book that is not just a business classic, but a foundational text on the physics of excellence itself. This is Good to Great: Why Some Companies Make the Leap and Others Don't, by Jim Collins. This book isn't about how visionary companies stay on top. Collins already wrote that book, Built to Last. This is about a much more difficult and far more common problem. It's about how the rest of us, the good, the average, the unremarkable, can achieve enduring greatness. The origin story of this book is, in itself, the perfect illustration of the problem. In 1996, Jim Collins was at a dinner with a group of thought leaders. He was riding high on the success of his best-selling book, Built to Last. A man named Bill Meehan, a managing director at the prestigious consulting firm McKinsey & Company, leaned over to him and said, "You know, Jim, we love Built to Last around here. You and your co-author did a very fine job. Unfortunately," he paused, "Hoot's useless." Collins, understandably curious, asked him to explain. Meehan continued, "The companies you wrote about were, for the most part, always great. They never had to turn themselves from good companies into great companies. They had founders like David Packard and George Merck, who shaped the character of greatness from early on. But what about the vast majority of companies that wake up partway through life and realize that they're good, but not great?" That question planted a seed. It became the driving force behind a colossal 5-year research project. Collins and his team of 21 researchers set out to answer it. Can a good company become a great company? And if so, how? Or is the disease of just being good incurable? The grand promise of this book is that good to great is not only possible, but it is not a matter of luck, or industry, or circumstance. It is a matter of conscious choice and disciplined action. The research was immense. They started with 435 companies from the Fortune 500 list, going back decades. They systematically sifted through them, looking for a very specific and demanding pattern: companies that had 15 years of average to underwhelming stock market performance, and then hit a distinct transition point, after which they delivered cumulative stock returns at least 3 times the general market for the next 15 years. To put that in perspective, the benchmark of 3 times the market beats the performance of acknowledged great companies like Coca-Cola, Intel, and GE. After a death march of financial analysis, they found only 11, just 11 companies out of 435 that made the leap from good to great and sustained it. These weren't sexy, headline-grabbing companies. They were companies like Walgreens, the drugstore chain, Kimberly-Clark, the paper company, and Fannie Mae, the mortgage finance company. As Collins notes, a dowdier group would be hard to find. And that was the first surprise. Greatness can be achieved in the most unlikely of situations. But finding the companies was only the start. The real work was in looking inside what they called the black box. For each of the 11 good to great companies, they selected a direct comparison company. One that was in the same industry, had the same opportunities, and was in a similar or even better position at the start, yet failed to make the leap. They compared Abbott Labs to Upjohn, Walgreens to Eckerd, Nucor Steel to Bethlehem Steel. Then they dove into the data, reading and coding nearly 6,000 articles, generating over 2,000 pages of interview transcripts, and analyzing every facet of these companies. From strategy to technology, from leadership to corporate culture. The question was always the same: what's the difference? What did the good to great companies have that the comparison companies did not? The promise of this book is that they found the answers. And those answers, the timeless principles that separate the great from the good, are what we are going to explore today. This isn't just a book summary. It's a look at the fundamental blueprint for excellence. The journey from good to great, Collins discovered, is a process of build-up followed by breakthrough. It's like relentlessly pushing a giant, heavy flywheel. The first few turns are agonizingly slow, requiring immense effort for almost imperceptible movement. But you keep pushing, and pushing, and eventually, the flywheel's own momentum kicks in, hurling it forward with unstoppable force. The comparison companies, in contrast, were always looking for a miracle moment, a single dramatic program or revolutionary change to rocket them to greatness. They'd push the flywheel one way, then stop, change direction, and push it another. They never built momentum. They were stuck in what Collins calls the doom loop. Today, we're going to examine the key concepts that get that flywheel turning. These are the foundational principles that, when practiced with discipline, can move any organization, and perhaps even any one of us, from the comfortable prison of good to the liberating expanse of great. The very first finding of the good to great study was also its most provocative, the one that completely upended conventional wisdom about leadership. Early in the project, Collins actually instructed his research team to downplay the role of leaders. He wanted to avoid the simplistic, heroic narrative that attributes all success to a single brilliant CEO. But the data, he says, simply would not let them. Time and time again, the researchers kept coming back to him, insisting, there is something consistently unusual about these leaders. We can't ignore them. When they finally relented and analyzed the leaders at the helm during the pivotal transition years, they discovered a shocking pattern. The good to great companies were not led by the larger-than-life celebrity CEOs we see on the covers of magazines. They weren't charismatic visionaries who rode in from the outside to save the day. In fact, the data showed that such leaders were negatively correlated with making the leap to greatness. Instead, every single one of the good to great companies had what Collins came to call a level 5 leader. So what is a level 5 leader? It's a study in duality, a paradoxical blend of profound personal humility and intense professional will. They are more like Abraham Lincoln than George Patton. The perfect embodiment of a level 5 leader is Darwin E. Smith, the man who transformed the stodgy old paper company Kimberly-Clark. In 1971, when Smith was appointed CEO, the company's stock had lagged the general market for 20 years. Smith was the company's mild-mannered in-house lawyer. He was so unassuming that a director pulled him aside after his appointment and reminded him that he lacked some of the qualifications for the position. Darwin Smith himself wasn't sure the board had made the right choice. He was a man with no airs of self-importance. He spent his vacations rumbling around his Wisconsin farm on a backhoe, digging holes and moving rocks. His favorite companionship was among plumbers and electricians. When a journalist once asked him to describe his management style, Smith, dressed like a farm boy in his first suit, just stared back through his nerdy, black-rimmed glasses. After a long, uncomfortable silence, he said simply, "Eccentric. But if you were to mistake this humility for weakness, you would be terribly mistaken." This was a man with a ferocious, even stoic, resolve. He put himself through college working the day shift at International Harvester and attending university at night. One day, he lost part of a finger on the job. The story goes he went to class that evening and returned to work the next day. 2 months after becoming CEO, doctors diagnosed him with nose and throat cancer and told him he had less than a year to live. He informed the board, but made it clear that he wasn't dead yet and had no plans to die anytime soon. He held to his demanding work schedule while commuting weekly for radiation therapy, and he lived for another 25 years, most of them as CEO. It was this same ferocious resolve that he brought to the transformation of Kimberly-Clark. Shortly after taking over, he and his team confronted a brutal fact: their traditional core business, coated paper, was doomed to mediocrity. The economics were bad and the competition was weak. They concluded their only path to greatness was to throw the company headlong into the fiercely competitive consumer paper products industry, going toe-to-toe with giants like Procter & Gamble. So, Smith made the most dramatic decision in the company's history. He announced they would sell the mills. All of them. Even the mill in the town of Kimberly, Wisconsin. One board member called it the gutsiest move he'd ever seen a CEO make. The business media called it stupid. Wall Street analysts downgraded the stock. But Darwin Smith never wavered. 25 years later, Kimberly-Clark owned its rival Scott Paper outright and beat Procter & Gamble in 6 out of 8 product categories. The company generated cumulative stock returns 4.1 times the general market under his leadership. When asked about his remarkable performance in retirement, Smith said simply, I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job. This is level 5, humility plus will. They are ambitious, to be sure, but their ambition is first and foremost for the company, not for themselves. They want to see the company become great and endure long after they are gone. In contrast, the leaders of the comparison companies were often egocentric level 4 leaders. Charismatic, effective, but ultimately concerned with their own reputation. Over 3/4 of the comparison companies had leaders who set up their successors for failure or chose weak successors, as if to prove that the place would fall apart without them. Level 5 leaders look out the window to attribute success to factors other than themselves. When things go well, they say, we were lucky, or we had a great team. When things go poorly, they look in the mirror and take full responsibility, saying, I am responsible. The comparison leaders did the opposite. They looked in the mirror to take credit for success and looked out the window to blame bad luck or other people for failure. This is the window and the mirror concept, and it is a defining characteristic of level 5. They are plow horses, not show horses, quietly and diligently doing whatever it takes to make the company great. And crucially, 10 of the 11 good to great CEOs came from inside the company, whereas the comparison companies tried outside CEOs 6 times more often. The data is clear. You don't need a savior from the outside. You need to cultivate greatness from within. Once the good to great leaders were in place, the research team expected to find that their first step would be to set a new vision, a new strategy, a new direction for the company. But they found something quite the opposite. The level 5 leaders didn't start with where. They started with who. This is the second great principle. Who then what? Before they figured out where to drive the bus, they first focused on getting the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats, and only then did they figure out where to drive it. This flips conventional wisdom on its head. The old adage, people are your most important asset, is wrong, Collins argues. People are not your most important asset. The right people are. The logic is simple and powerful. First, if you begin with who, you can more easily adapt to a changing world. If people are on your bus because of where it's going, what happens when you have to change direction 10 miles down the road? You have a problem. But if people are on the bus because of who else is on the bus, then it's much easier to change direction. Second, if you have the right people, the problem of how to motivate and manage them largely goes away. The right people don't need to be tightly managed. They are motivated by an inner drive to produce the best results and be part of creating something great. Third, if you have the wrong people, it doesn't matter if you have the right direction. You still won't have a great company. A great vision without great people is irrelevant. Consider the case of Wells Fargo. Their spectacular 15-year run began in 1983, but the foundation was laid in the 1970s under CEO Dick Cooley. Cooley foresaw that the banking industry was heading for wrenching change, but he didn't pretend to know what form that change would take. So instead of mapping out a detailed strategy, he and Chairman Ernie Arbuckle focused on injecting an endless stream of talent into the company. They hired outstanding people whenever and wherever they found them, often without a specific job in mind. That's how you build the future, Cooley said. If I'm not smart enough to see the changes that are coming, they will. This proved prescient. When banking deregulation hit, no bank handled the changes better. At a time when its banking sector fell 59% behind the general market, Wells Fargo outperformed the market by over 3 times. Its rival, Bank of America, took a very different approach. It followed the weak generals, strong lieutenants model. The idea was that if you pick strong, capable leaders, generals, their talented deputies, lieutenants, might leave. So you pick weak placeholders as generals, and the strong lieutenants are more likely to stick around. The result was a culture of mediocrity, where managers waited for directions from above. When Bank of America finally realized it needed to change, where did it find its new strong generals? It recruited them from across the street at Wells Fargo. The good to great companies understood that in determining the right people, character attributes were more important than specific skills or knowledge. They figured they could teach skills, but they couldn't teach character, work ethic, intelligence, or dedication. This is a rigorous, not ruthless process. It's not about hacking and cutting or wantonly firing people. It's about consistently applying exacting standards, especially in upper management. When the good to great companies knew they had to make a people change, they acted. Letting the wrong people hang around is unfair to all the right people, who inevitably have to compensate for their inadequacies. It's also unfair to the person who needs to get off the bus, stealing precious time from their life that they could be using to find a place where they can truly flourish. In contrast to the disciplined first who model, many of the comparison companies followed what Collins calls the genius with 1,000 helpers model. In this model, the company is a platform for one extraordinary individual. The genius is the primary driving force, and they just need an army of good soldiers to help implement their great ideas. This works as long as the genius is around. But when the genius leaves, the helpers are often lost. This was the story of Eckerd Corporation. Jack Eckerd was a genius at figuring out what to do, which stores to buy, where to put them. But he had little ability to assemble the right on the executive team. When he left to pursue politics, the company, lacking his guiding genius, began a long decline. Cork Walgreen of Walgreens, in contrast, was a genius at picking the right people. He built the best executive team in the industry, and the primary guidance for strategy came from their group dialogue, not from inside one person's head. He chose a successor who proved to be even better than he was. That's the first who principle in action. Getting the right people on the bus isn't just the first step. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. Having the right people on the bus and a level 5 leader at the wheel is essential, but it's not enough. To find the right path to greatness, you must have the discipline to look reality straight in the eye, no matter how harsh. This brings us to the third core concept from the book, one of its most memorable and profound ideas. Confront the brutal facts, yet never lose faith. This is the Stockdale paradox. The name comes from Admiral Jim Stockdale, the highest-ranking U.S. military officer in the Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp during the Vietnam War. He was tortured over 20 times during his 8-year imprisonment. He had no prisoner's rights, no set release date, and no certainty that he would even survive to see his family again. Yet, he shouldered the burden of command, creating systems to help other prisoners deal with torture and to communicate and reduce their sense of isolation. When Jim Collins had the chance to spend an afternoon with Stockdale, he asked him the question that had been haunting him. How did you deal with it when you were actually there and did not know the end of the story? Stockdale replied, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which, in retrospect, I would not trade. Collins was struck by this incredible display of faith. Then, after a few moments of walking in silence, he asked another question. Who didn't make it out? Oh, that's easy, Stockdale said. The optimists. Collins was completely confused. The optimists? Stockdale explained. The optimists. Oh, they were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come, and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter. And Easter would come, and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving, and then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. Then Stockdale delivered the crucial lesson. This is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. This is the Stockdale paradox. It is a signature of all who create greatness. You must retain absolute faith that you can and will prevail, while simultaneously confronting the most brutal, difficult, and painful facts of your current reality. The good to great companies all live this paradox. The comparison companies were often like the optimists in the prison camp. They stuck their heads in the sand, hoping for the best, rather than confronting the cold, hard truth. The most vivid example of this is the story of the grocery chains A&P versus Kroger. In the 1950s, A&P was a giant, the largest retailing organization in the world. Kroger was an unspectacular, good-enough competitor, less than half its size. But in the second half of the 20th century, the world changed. Americans wanted bigger, nicer stores with more variety. The old, cheap, utilitarian grocery store model was dying. Both companies knew this. Both had the information, but their responses were polar opposites. A&P, run by a leadership that saw its job as preserving the past glory of its founders, tried to defend against the brutal facts. They even opened an experimental new superstore called the Golden Key. It was a huge success. Customers loved it. It was the answer to their problems, right under their noses. So what did A&P executives do? They didn't like the answers it gave, so they closed it down. They clung to the belief that their old model was right and lurched from one failed program to another, their stores getting dirtier and more desolate until the once great company dwindled to a sad remnant of its former self. Kroger, meanwhile, confronted the brutal facts head-on. By 1970, their executive team came to an inescapable conclusion: the old model grocery store was going to become extinct. It was a brutal fact, but they didn't hide from it. Guided by the faith that they would prevail, they set about methodically and systematically changing or replacing every single store, turning their entire system inside out to fit the new reality. It wasn't a single, flashy program. It was a long, arduous process. But by confronting reality, the right decisions became self-evident. Over the next 25 years, Kroger generated cumulative returns 10 times the market and 80 times better than A&P. Kroger was like Stockdale. A&P was like the optimists, dying of a broken heart. Creating a climate where the truth is heard is a hallmark of good to great companies. Collins identified 4 practices they used to do this. 1. Lead with questions, not answers. 2. Engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion. 3. Conduct autopsies without blame. And 4. Build, red flag, mechanisms that turn information into information that cannot be ignored. Greatness begins with a brutal and honest assessment of reality. It's only by looking the monster in the eye that you can find the courage and the clarity to defeat it. So you have level 5 leadership, you have the right people on the bus, and you are confronting the brutal facts of your reality. Now comes the critical moment of insight. You have to translate all of that potential into a simple, coherent concept that will guide every decision you make. This is the 4th key idea, the hedgehog concept. The concept comes from an ancient Greek parable, famously referenced by the philosopher Isaiah Berlin. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. The fox is a cunning creature, sleek and fast, who devises a myriad of complex strategies to attack the hedgehog. The hedgehog, by contrast, is a dowdier, simpler creature. He waddles along, going about his day. When the fox attacks, the hedgehog doesn't try to outsmart him. He does the one thing he knows how to do better than anyone else. He rolls up into a perfect little ball of sharp spikes. The fox, seeing this impenetrable defense, calls off the attack. Day after day, despite the fox's superior cunning, the hedgehog always wins. Berlin used this parable to divide the world into 2 types of thinkers, foxes and hedgehogs. Foxes pursue many ends at the same time and see the world in all its complexity. They are scattered, diffused, and inconsistent. Hedgehogs, on the other hand, simplify a complex world into a single organizing idea, a basic principle or concept that unifies and guides everything. They see what is essential and ignore the rest. The good to great companies were all hedgehogs. The comparison companies were, for the most part, foxes. They got tripped up by complexity, chased fads, and pursued growth for growth's sake without a unifying idea. The good to great companies, in contrast, found a simple, elegant concept and implemented it with fanatical consistency. But the hedgehog concept isn't just any simple idea. It's a deep understanding that comes from the intersection of 3 circles. You must ask your organization 3 questions. What can you be the best in the world at? And, equally important, what can you not be the best in the world at? This goes far beyond a core competence. You might be good at something, but if you can't be the very best at it, it cannot be part of your hedgehog concept. What drives your economic engine? This involves finding the single economic denominator, profit per X, or in the social sector, cash flow per X. That has the greatest and most sustainable impact. What are you deeply passionate about? This isn't about stimulating passion, but discovering what you are already passionate about. A hedgehog concept is not a goal or a strategy. It is an understanding. It's a simple, crystalline concept that flows from deep reflection on these 3 circles. Consider Walgreens. For years, they struggled to define themselves. But then, they developed their hedgehog concept: be the best, most convenient drugstores with high profit per customer visit. Simple, but powerful. This simple idea drove everything. They replaced inconvenient stores with hyper-convenient corner locations, even if it meant closing a profitable store to open a better one half a block away. They pioneered drive-through pharmacies. They clustered their stores so densely in urban areas that they created impenetrable convenience zones. This drove up their economic denominator, profit per customer visit. More convenience led to more visits, and higher margin services increased the profit from each one. It was a self-reinforcing loop. Walgreens the Hedgehog beat Intel, GE, and Coca-Cola over this period. Its comparison company, Eckerd, was a fox. They chased growth everywhere, buying candy companies and home video stores, lurching from one strategy to another without a coherent, guiding concept. They were eventually acquired and ceased to exist as an independent company. This process of finding the hedgehog concept is not a one-time event. The book shows that it took the good to great companies an average of 4 years to clarify their concept. It's an iterative process of dialogue and debate, guided by the 3 circles. Collins suggests creating a council, a group of the right people who engage in this process over time, asking the right questions, autopsying the results, and building understanding. It's not about bravado, shouting from the rooftops that you're going to be the best. It's about the quiet, calm, simple realization of a fact. When you find your hedgehog concept, it will have the quiet ping of truth. You won't need to sell it or hype it. It will be an idea that speaks for itself. We've now covered the foundational mindset of the good to great companies. It begins with level 5 leadership, which creates the conditions for everything else. It continues with getting the right people on the bus. With the right people in place, you can confront the brutal facts of reality without destroying morale. And by confronting the brutal facts, you can begin the iterative process of discovering your hedgehog concept. These concepts are what Collins calls disciplined thought. But thought alone is not enough. You must translate that thought into action. This brings us to the final, crucial phase of the transformation, building a culture of discipline and igniting the flywheel. This is where all the preceding concepts come together to create unstoppable momentum. A culture of discipline is not what you might think. It's not about a top-down, tyrannical leader enforcing rules. The comparison companies often had that, with a strongman CEO who imposed his will on the organization, only to have the company fall apart when he left. No, a truly disciplined culture is the combination of 2 seemingly contradictory forces, an ethic of entrepreneurship and a culture of discipline. Collins illustrates this with a simple matrix. If you have a strong culture but no discipline, you get a chaotic startup. If you have a strong discipline but no culture of entrepreneurship, you get a stifling bureaucracy. But when you combine a culture of discipline with an ethic of entrepreneurship, you get the magical alchemy of great performance. This is possible because it all starts with disciplined people, as we discussed in the first who principle. When you have self-disciplined people, you don't need hierarchy. When you have disciplined thought, you don't need bureaucracy. When you have disciplined action, you don't need excessive controls. You can give people freedom within a framework. The framework is the hedgehog concept. The good to great companies built a consistent system around their hedgehog concept and then gave people the freedom and responsibility to operate within that system. A great example of this discipline is the creation of a stop doing list. Most of us have to-do lists, which grow ever longer as we try to do more and more. The good to great companies were just as rigorous about what they would stop doing. They had the discipline to unplug anything that did not fit squarely within their 3 circles. This is the ultimate act of disciplined action. And this brings us back to the flywheel. The image of the flywheel captures the entire process. Each concept we've discussed is another powerful push on the flywheel. Getting the right people on the bus is a push. Confronting the brutal facts is a push. Discovering your hedgehog concept gives you clarity on which direction to push. Adhering to that concept with a culture of discipline is another powerful push. The cumulative effect of these pushes, turn upon turn, step by step, builds momentum. From the outside, it can look like a dramatic, overnight revolution. The media only pays attention when the flywheel is already spinning at 1,000 rotations per minute. They write about the breakthrough as if it were a single event. Collins uses the analogy of an egg cracking. To the world, a chicken suddenly appears. But from the chicken's point of view, it was a long, slow process of evolving, growing, and incubating. Cracking the shell was just one final, big step in a long chain of events. The good to great transformations were the same. There was no single defining action, no grand program, no miracle moment. The leaders themselves couldn't point to one. When interviewed, they would say things like, "It wasn't a flash from the blue. It was an evolution." The quiet, deliberate, relentless process of pushing on the flywheel in a consistent direction is what creates the breakthrough. The comparison companies, in contrast, were trapped in the doom loop. Instead of a patient build-up, they'd launch new flashy programs with great fanfare, trying to jump right to breakthrough. When these failed to produce sustained results, they would change direction, lurching back and forth, trying new leaders, new strategies, and misguided acquisitions. They never built any cumulative momentum. The flywheel would grind to a halt, and the doom loop would begin anew. The flywheel effect explains why motivation was never a problem for the good, to great companies. When people see tangible results, when they can feel the flywheel beginning to move, they line up with enthusiasm to throw their shoulders against it. Success breeds commitment and alignment. The flywheel does the motivating. Finally, what about technology? In our tech-obsessed world, we often see technology as the cause of greatness or failure. Collins's research found this to be a dangerous myth. Technology, he argues, is an accelerator of momentum, not a creator of it. The good to great companies were pioneers in the application of technology, but they never adopted technology for its own sake. They first got their flywheel turning, guided by their hedgehog concept, and then they used technology to accelerate that momentum. Technology without a clear hedgehog concept, Collins warns, is useless at best and destructive at worst. It simply accelerates your path to demise. So, why this book? What makes good to great so radically different and so enduringly essential? It's not just another collection of business advice. Its unique essence lies in its ruthless empiricism. Collins didn't start with a theory. He started with a question and let the data speak for itself. No matter how much it violated conventional wisdom, the book's power comes from its methodology of direct, controlled comparison. By looking at what the good to great companies did that their nearly identical comparison companies didn't do, Collins isolates the true variables of excellence. This is a book for anyone who believes in evidence over opinion. It's for the leader who is not content with being merely successful and feels a deep, inner compulsion to create something of enduring excellence. It's for the school principal, the nonprofit director, the team manager, the entrepreneur. It's for anyone who wants to understand the fundamental physics of how to build momentum and achieve breakthrough results. However, this book is emphatically not for the impatient. It is not for those seeking a quick fix, a silver bullet, or the latest management fad. It offers no easy answers. The concepts are simple, but their execution requires immense discipline and a long-term perspective. It's a book for the plow horse, not the show horse. It's for those who understand that true greatness is never the result of a single brilliant stroke, but the cumulative effect of 1,000 small, disciplined steps taken in a consistent direction. The single most valuable takeaway you will be left with is a profound sense of empowerment. Greatness, Collins proves, is not primarily a function of circumstance, but a matter of conscious choice and discipline. This is a liberating and deeply hopeful message. It removes all excuses. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, how bad your luck has been, or what resources you lack. The framework for greatness is available to you. The only remaining question is whether you will have the discipline to apply it. Good to Great provides not just the inspiration to make that choice, but the clear evidence-based roadmap for the journey. We began with a simple, powerful paradox: good is the enemy of great. For the last 30 minutes, we have explored the map that Jim Collins and his team meticulously crafted, a map that shows us how to navigate from the comfortable, crowded shores of good to the rarefied air of great. We've seen that the journey begins with the quiet humility and ferocious will of a level 5 leader. It demands the discipline to get the right people on the bus before you even know the destination. It requires the courage to confront the brutal facts of your reality while never losing faith that you will prevail. And it culminates in the crystalline clarity of the hedgehog concept, the simple, elegant truth that becomes the central axis around which your flywheel spins, gaining momentum with every single disciplined push. This summary is just the map. Reading the book is the journey itself. To truly feel the power of these ideas, you have to let the stories wash over you. The story of Darwin Smith, the quiet man who took on the world. The story of the Kroger team, who faced extinction and chose to rebuild. The story of Admiral Stockdale, who taught us the meaning of faith. This book does more than just inform, it challenges you. It holds up a mirror and asks the most profound question a leader can face. Now that you know the path, will you make the choice to walk it? The question this book leaves you with is not, can I be great? But will I? If you are ready to answer that question for yourself, for your team, or for your organization, I urge you to pick up a copy of Good to Great by Jim Collins. The link is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the books that shape our world. Now go and choose greatness.